Hello, welcome to the first episode of the Drive Team podcast. I'm Winston.
And I'm Ev. We are your hosts on the new podcast all about VEX Robotics. In every episode, we will be talking with a member of the VEX community about their journey and experiences. We will hear about their years as a participant or their time as a coach, and share some insight into the world of VEX Robotics.
In this first episode, we'll be joined by Kevin Boenisch, former VRC competitor and now the founder and president at RoboSource.net.
Join us as we talk with Kevin, looking back at his fascinating career involved in robotics.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you for joining us on the first episode of the Drive Team podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
That's great to hear. So why don't you start us off by telling us a bit about yourself and some of your experiences?
Yeah, I'm the founder and president at RoboSource, and I've also been involved in robotics for quite some time now. So what is RoboSource? If you're not familiar with what we do, basically our goal is kind of to be a one-stop source for anyone that's participating in VEX Robotics and is looking for anything they need that's not a VEX part. So you would get your VEX electronics, metal kits, whatever you need, obviously from VEX, and then you can come to RoboSource to find any tools, hardware, and other things like plastic sheets that you might need. So I first started with First Lego League, did that for a few years. Then I was involved with VEX Robotics Competition through high school. And then after high school, when I went to college, I'm still running RoboSource and still involved in that sense, and also volunteering both with the First Lego League and the VEX Robotics Competition at some events throughout the year.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you first started in First Lego League. Why did you start robotics there?
Yeah, so it actually started with a Lego Mindstorms camp that I did at a place called Fast Cats back home in Toronto, Canada. And that was actually the predecessor to the Pylons VEX team, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah.
Before their organization that they're based out of EBOS existed, John and Pam, who run the place, and I've got to give them a shout out. They're really great people, some of the best people I know, to be honest. They ran a place called Fast Cats that was doing model RC car racing. So they had like a model RC car racetrack in a little shop. And then on the side, they started doing some robotics camps. And that's how I first got involved. Did a camp, really liked it, and then took part in their first Lego League team and kind of stuck with it as I went through the years. Did First Lego League, starting with the Smart Move Challenge through to the Senior Solutions Challenge. And then when I went to high school, at my high school, they didn't have a VEX Robotics team at the time, but myself, a couple of our friends, and a teacher worked together to start a new team there. And I was part of that team for 2 years, starting with Toss-Up, which personally is my favorite VEX game, but probably a little bit biased there, and Skyrise. Mm-hmm. And both those years, we made it to the World Championship, which was really cool, especially for a first-year brand new team. We had a lot of fun with it. And then after that, I started a community VEX Robotics team with a couple of friends that didn't have a VEX team at their school. It was a small team. There's about 4 or 5 of us on average, working out of my basement for the most part. At one point, we had a VEX field set up in our living room, taking up the entire living room. So I know my mom was not a huge fan of that, but you got to practice somewhere. Yeah. So that's the best place we had in our living room. So I did that for the Nothing But Net and for Starstruck. Both those years, we actually qualified to Worlds as well. In the Starstruck season, we focused a lot on the skills challenge. For quite some time, we were actually first in the global ranking in skills, and then at Worlds, we placed second in skills.
Wow.
We got to play in the dome.
Wow.
Which was really cool. That was a lot of fun, actually. And the nifty thing about that is we basically ran a fully autonomous driver skills. So we had our programming skills, and aside from a few small changes, we just ran programming skills for driver skills. It was quite unique and surprised a lot of people that that's what we were doing and scoring what we were with a fully or almost fully autonomous driver skills.
That's cool. So this was for which team number again?
Yeah, so that was 2188A was our community team. 2188 is no longer around, unfortunately. All of us have moved on since.
I see. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us.
So you said you started your own VEX team in high school. Can you tell us a bit more about what that was like and any highlights you remember?
Yeah. So I think the way it started was that a couple of us had either participated in something like First Lego League before, or we knew about robotics and thought it'd be cool. And we were working with a teacher who was also interested in robotics. And we didn't really know what to do. We looked at a couple different competitions, different ways to do robotics, settled on VEX as, the most suitable program, if you will, based on the size of our school, the interests, and so on. And just said, hey, let's start a VEX team. We have no idea what we're doing, but let's buy some parts, set up a place to work, and just start building robots. So it really started with not a whole lot of resources and knowledge behind it. Just a couple of us and a teacher who were really into it and put a lot of time into figuring it out. And we also definitely could not have done it without working together with some other teams in the area. Who just, helped us out, gave us advice, how to get started, how to, learn programming, things like that. And we kind of just took it from there and figured it out as we went.
That's quite cool, because this season I actually started my own team as well with a couple of friends. So it's great to hear there's like many teams outside of like actual organizations. Pretty fun.
Yeah.
You're currently the president of RoboSource.net. Tell us a bit about your company and what you do there, and why did you start RoboSource?
Yeah, RoboSource actually started at first as a fundraising initiative for that community team that I mentioned. Myself and a couple of friends, we knew we wanted to start a community robotics team, but we didn't know how to pay for it. Obviously, you've got to buy parts if you want to build robots.
Yeah. And
the idea then was to sell a couple of other related products and use the money we make from that to buy VEX parts to build our robots. And that's how it started, really just, pretty low-key fundraising thing.
Oh, yeah.
One of the first RoboSource product per se we had was some foam balls. They were foam balls that you launch into nets. And we figured import some similar balls that teams could use if they didn't need or couldn't afford a full field. They could just get a couple of these foam balls from us and use them to practice. And I remember when I first started that, I really had no idea what I was doing. So I found a supplier overseas, placed an order. They shipped it over. Eventually it got here, and then we had to pick it up at this freight terminal and get it back home, to where our team was based in my basement. Figured it would fit in both of my parents' cars. So we drive there to this massive warehouse with our two little cars. Pouring rain when we get there. It's probably the most rain we'd had all year. We show up with our cars. Eventually, they start bringing out the boxes to the loading dock where we were, and they just keep bringing more boxes. And we're wondering how many boxes do they have? Well, it turns out the information I had beforehand, how much space it would take up, wasn't quite right. So we had all these boxes with our cars back to the loading dock, started trying to fit them in the cars. Then eventually we had to open up the boxes. We were taking out individual balls, stuffing them in all the corners of both the cars. They're completely full of these foam balls. The whole time it's pouring rain. So eventually we actually don't fit it all in. We have to go back again later. But we stuff the cars full of these soaking wet foam balls. And then when we get home, we have to unpack all of them. We had towels spread out in various rooms in the house to spread out all the products and let them dry. So it was quite a crazy operation. And that was the first RoboSource product. Definitely one I'll remember. And then over time, we kind of just added more things based on what other teams needed, just kept adding products and kept growing it over time.
Yeah.
And then when I went to college to WPI in Massachusetts, I kind of just took the business with me and kept running it. At that time, it was still a very small thing, very low key. So the first RoboSource location per se was actually based out of a storage locker unit. And I had my bicycle with a little luggage carrier rack on the back that I used to take packages to the post office down the street. And then same as before, kind of just added new products and expanded over time. And then where RoboSource is today, kind of as a business, it's actually more than just the VEX related things we do. which, most people when they're just looking at the website, obviously don't realize that there's the VEX side, but there's also a couple other things we're doing on the business side. And the reason I mentioned that is it puts us in a kind of interesting position where the VEX side of the business isn't even that significant right now, but it's just kind of passion driven, if you will. I do it because it's fun, and I just like, offering products that help other teams and kind of being part of the community, helping others. And even though it's not that significant part of the business, we sort of have the resources that, in terms of logistics and capabilities, manufacturing, and so on, to support products that, it might be a smaller market on the VEX robotics related product side, but we can still, offer things that might otherwise not make sense without some of the other capabilities we have in place.
That's really cool. Fascinating to hear about RoboSource as a company.
So you mentioned that this isn't just for VEX parts. Is this like for all the different first robotics competitions, and they can purchase these no matter what competition they're in?
Yes, on the robotics competition side, I've had the question from time to time to expand into first robotics. It's not a market that we're in right now. There's a lot of our products, especially things like plastic sheets that are used in first robotics. I know of first robotics teams that buy them from us. But aside from VEX Robotics, a lot of what we do is actually plastic sheets. So if you think of what you will use it on a VEX robot, a 12 by 24 inch piece with polycarbonate or ABS, for example. Materials like that, we distribute a whole variety of applications.
Yeah, I use those a lot on my robot.
Yeah.
So how do you ensure that each of the parts you produce fits within the current regulations, even though they're not official?
Yeah, so that's a good question, actually. So RoboSource obviously is not a reseller of VEX parts. We don't sell any VEX parts, and we don't have control over the rules. We kind of just work within the rules and try to offer products that are both competition legal and something helpful. On one hand, whenever we're adding new products, we're just always diligent to make sure that what we're selling fits within those rules. Obviously, if it's not competition legal, it's not super useful for teams to use. And then we're also updating the information on the website. So if the rules do change and something no longer is competition legal, we always try to keep that information up to date on the website. There are a few things that in recent revisions of the rules, for example, aluminum screws are no longer legal. So they're still on the website because we do still have some stock of them. And if somebody wanted to use them for a classroom or for a hobby project, they absolutely can. But there is that information for them to know that it's not competition legal, because we just want to be completely transparent and make sure everyone's aware of that. And then also, just kind of generally speaking, obviously, like I said, we don't have control over the rules per se. We just kind of work within the competition rules. But I do think that VEX kind of does understand that RoboSource is a part of the community, if you will, that a lot of teams rely on to kind of make things easier for them or to support their programs. And in a similar sense, I would say that even though there's some products that you could buy the same product from VEX or from RoboSource, we're not really competing with VEX on a business sense, really. The amount of products that, there's a one-to-one comparison between is quite small. Even on our scale is pretty small, and even more insignificant, I would imagine, on VEX's scale. And there's also a lot of the products that we sell that are, not even competition legal. Things like tools or robot cases are absolutely helpful for teams to have and important to have, but it's not something you put on your robot that's subject to rules that could change.
Yeah, a lot of the RoboSource parts are really, really useful. So there's a huge category of products on RoboSource. Which one's your personal favorite? I know my personal favorite is probably the colored screws. They come in really handy.
Yeah, so I would have to agree with you on that one. The serious answer to that question would also be that I think the color-coded screws are my favorite product. Because for one, they're so simple. It's just painting the screw head different color for different length, but it's really effective to help sort them. I personally wish I would have had that when I was participating in VEX Robotics. I don't even know how much time I spent or other team members spent sorting through the bucket of screws to find something. And I've also talked to a lot of people that really like them as well. I've talked to some people that said they were a little reluctant at first because they think it looks silly having, all these different colored screws on the robots, which is, I can kind of understand that. If you're trying to go for really sleek designed robots, the different colors of screws might not quite fit the styling. But, in the end, those coaches said they did end up caving into the color-coded screws and found it a lot more helpful to keep their parts organized. Yeah. On the other side, I've also talked to some people, at least one team told me they buy the screws based on the color, and then they cut them down to the length they need. So I'm not sure that's something that I would do, or something that I would necessarily endorse. But I got a good laugh out of that one. So there's some people doing it out there. And then the sort of less serious answer for the favorite product, I think, would have to be the RoboSource.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So the RoboSource idea, it actually kind of started way back when RoboSource first started, in the early days. Back then I had some, cheap, crappy cell phone, and whenever I typed RoboSource, it would autocorrect it to RoboSource. And it's strange because neither of those are dictionary words. To be honest, it was kind of annoying. It was a little funny, but it was mostly annoying. And then over time, it was kind of just a bit of a running joke. Would it be funny if we had a RoboSource mascot? And then one day, I kind of decided, what's stopping me from doing this? Nothing. Let's just do it. Let's make a RoboSource. And honestly, I think it's probably the best idea I've had. People just really like them. It's when we bring them to events and hand them out, we always run out, especially with a lot of the younger students are huge fans of them as well. There was one event I was at a little while back, a girl-powered workshop, where they were handing out a couple of RoboSources to encourage students to ask questions after presentation. How it usually is when there's, some sort of talk or presentation, no one really wants to go up and ask a question afterwards. It's kind of awkward. But you should have seen this within, before you could even look, half the room was lining up to ask a question to try and get a RoboSource. So yeah, they're always fun. People seem to like them.
Yeah, I have one sitting on my bed right now.
Yeah, the RoboSource is very cute. But RoboSource is continuing to grow in popularity. So what are some of your ideas for the future of RoboSource?
Yeah, so we're always kind of just trying to add new products that teams help. That's really just our goal, to offer things that are helpful for teams, for students and coaches, to just make things easier, help them build robots, help them organize. And one of the things that we're working on right now is kind of a storage system for VEX parts. It's still a little while out. It's in the early development. So I'm excited about that one. Similarly, if anyone has any requests, ideas, things they'd really like to see, shoot us a message, shoot us an email. We're always looking for ideas and would love to make something happen. And then one other new product, it's actually a little bit of a secret, if I can let you two and anybody listening in on that secret. Actually, I haven't really told anyone yet. Some of the RoboSource team don't even know about this one. We're working on a new RoboSource team member, a mini RoboSource perhaps. So maybe in December there'll be something interesting coming up. You'll have to keep an eye out.
Yeah.
And maybe it might even be a free offer in December. We'll have to see.
We'll see.
Maybe I'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah. That is very fascinating. But this is the part of the podcast where we ask each guest about their favorite moment of robotics of all. It can be while competing or while, like in your case, doing RoboSource. What's your favorite part of your journey?
I was thinking about it earlier, and there's just a lot of things, robot designs, tournaments, things that went wrong, friends you make along the way, milestones. And earlier today I was looking through a couple of photos, and it's just cool to kind of look back at some of these memories and remember what you did with, your robotics experience. I think it's kind of different for everyone. Robotics is really, you get out of it whatever you want to put into it. Some people might, take a class at their school. Some people might make it their life for a year or 4 years at a time, or even more. But, whatever you do, I think it's really about just having fun, because at the end of the day, that's what you'll remember and that's what you'll enjoy. You don't need to win worlds. You don't need to make it to worlds. You don't need to win anything. But as long as you have fun and enjoy it and whatever that may look like for you. I think that's the part that really counts and that you'll really enjoy and remember looking back.
Yeah, for sure. I think the moments where you're having fun, those are the best ones.
So what advice would you give to the people listening to this podcast?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I would recommend. The first one is really just to be creative. Try new designs. Don't be afraid to fail. Do something different. And that's kind of what I did when I was competing in VEX. I always did something different. I never did, the standard cookie cutter robot design for that year. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't. I remember one match in Skyrise, we had a robot that instead of a lift, it would just, with rubber bands, expand upwards at the start of the match and stay at full height. And one match, something went wrong and the thing went flying out sideways and nearly took out the referee.
Oh, no.
So, looking back, it's pretty funny. I tell you, during that match, it sure was not funny, worrying about whether we're going to get disqualified for nearly taking out the ref. Nothing but net. When everyone was doing flywheels, we did a double puncher design. It worked well. It didn't work quite as well as the fight was, but it was still something different and it was cool. In Starstruck, we did some massive, 4-foot wide forks instead of a claw. They were really impractical in a match. We actually had a smaller version we switched out for matches versus the massive ones we used for skills. But again, it was cool. None of these designs were something that would, win worlds. But people remember them, people like them, judges like them. And to be honest, it's a whole lot more fun and a lot more rewarding to do something different than just a cookie cutter design. So just try it out, do something different would be my suggestion. Another thing I would say, don't underestimate strategy and planning and how important it is, both when you're designing a robot, going with the theme of doing something different, but also at tournaments and in matches. Bad robots can do well in matches. If your robot doesn't move, maybe not, but I should maybe say, mediocre robots can outperform really strong robots with good strategies.
Definitely. Yeah.
I remember one match. This was probably my favorite match that I played in toss-up. That game that year, there was a bump that crossed the field. So what we did, our team, the whole match, we did nothing but trapping 3560Z behind that bump. It was such a simple strategy, but it let our partner play 1v1 while we just kept 3560Z in the corner so they couldn't use their robot to score points. And that was pretty cool seeing that work out and what you can do with strategy. And another thing I would really suggest for teams, and both new teams and experienced teams and their coaches, is getting together with some other teams and scrimmaging and playing some matches is really cool, because playing with other robots is so different than just practicing by yourself on a field. Maybe share a couple ideas or a couple, strategy thoughts about the game, but you still got to keep some secrets. At the end of the day, you're still competing against one another when you go to competition. But having that sense of community is really helpful, and both in terms of practicing with the robot itself, but just getting to know people. My team and a couple of others in our community would go to, there was an annual event called Midnight Madness in our town. Businesses and community groups would show what they're doing. So we'd set up a field, out on the street in downtown and play some matches. It's kind of fun actually when you're doing these sorts of demos, because you can bend the rules a little bit. You can make some strats to look cool. When it's not about winning and it's about impressing other people, it's kind of fun when you can really show off what your robots and put a little bit of planning to that. But I would say, just get out there in your community and show other people, it's not just about building the robot, it's about sharing what you do. And that kind of also leads into the last point, like I mentioned earlier. I think the most important thing is to just have fun with it, to be honest. A couple of years when you likely moved on from robotics and are doing whatever you may be doing then, the things you're going to look back at are what you had the most fun with. And the really good experiences you had. Who cares if you ranked this spot in the tournament, or even if you won an award? It's really awesome to win awards, but a couple of years down the road, what you really remember and what you really get the most out of it is the things you enjoy. So just have fun with it. That would be my advice.
Yeah.
That's some pretty great advice. Unfortunately, though, that brings us to the end of the first episode on the Drive Team. Thank you so much for being our first guest, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was fun chatting, and I'd love to be back anytime.
Yeah, thank you. It was a pleasure talking with you today.
That was Kevin Boenisch, former VEX Robotics Competition competitor and founder and president of RoboSource.net. Kevin's journey went from being a normal competitor to the president of a recognized brand, providing teams all over the world with robot parts and tools.
We hope you enjoyed the first episode of this show. Remember to follow the podcast on your platform of choice so you won't miss any future updates. We'll have a new episode coming every 2 weeks. That's it for now, and thank you for joining us on The Drive Team.